Oh, okay, recording. Christina Marrera, president of Elizabeth Parents and Students Care, a local nonprofit here in Elizabeth, where we try to bring parents together to talk about all sorts of issues that affect our kids in the school district, and community events, and just share all kinds of resources. And so, because there has been some lacking of special education parent advisory committee through the school district, we decided to do this special education series to try to help educate parents, fill in the gaps. And we're hoping that after this three-part series, this is the last of the three-part series, that we can get some feedback and start doing some in-person meetings to see kind of like what parents are looking for, what more information they need. So this was just kind of like a nice little like introductory three-part series that we're doing. So I'm gonna let Maria introduce herself. And we have Dr. Gallant here as well. Maybe I'll have you, Dr. Gallant, introduce yourself, and then I'll let Maria do it, and then she could go from there.
Okay. Hi, Antoine and Yvonne. As Christina said, my name is Patty Gallant. I was a teacher in Elizabeth for 25 years, taught special ed. And once I retired, I decided to join Christina and Maria in their fight for every kid in Elizabeth, because we know every time we help one kid, we help a lot of kids.
All right, Maria, it's all you.
I'm Maria Lorenz. I have two kids with special needs here in Elizabeth, where we started out about, wow, it's been 15 years ago since I've been here. I came from New York City, so not knowing much about the laws, and coming into Elizabeth and starting to see changes and regression, I understood that I needed to be my child's most fiercest advocate, because if you don't speak up, you don't get what you want. And if you don't fight for it, you're definitely at a disadvantage. My child was in district, and I put up quite a fight to get him into an out of district placement, because it was very clear to me in 2 years' time of moving him from New York City here that this was not the place for him. And also struggles with my youngest son in getting him the appropriate services didn't quite plan out. And now he's doing and thriving and excelling in a different placement. I ran into Christina into one of my board meetings when I was speaking, and we've connected since then, and we've helped many, many parents understand their rights, teaching them how to advocate and support their kids. So this is a three-part series. Again, we look to expand and build on this more to continue to educate the community. So this applies to those in Jersey, just basic rights and special ed. I'll be referring to some stuff that's federal, that applies to everyone, and some stuff that is more narrow, because New Jersey has its own set of laws, and we're fortunate that way. Because we have laws that protect us, unlike other states where it's just a federal law, and the federal law can be very broad. So it puts many kids at a disadvantage. So I just want to start with some basic rights in special education and understanding what those rights are. Let me see if this advances. So the basic rights under IDEA, which is the federal law, is the right to a free and appropriate education in the least restrictive environment, right? So we know that there's like a timeline, a continuum, where we go from least restrictive, which is general ed, you go to a more restrictive setting, which can be 14, 16 kids in a class, to a more restricted setting, such as a self-contained class. That is the most restrictive setting. The development of an IEP plan is also part of a basic right. So the purpose of the law is to make sure that children with special need receive an education that allows them to progress from one grade level to the next, while learning and utilizing skills acquired as a typical developing child would. Typically, what we would want to see, and is would be ideal, is for a child to have other peers to model if they're in a particular setting. But sometimes that's not possible, and we need to go into a most restrictive setting for that. Provide related services and support necessary so that your child can become an adult that's capable of contributing to his or her community. I believe that's the goal of all of us, right? That they grow up and they can be independent on their own. So your rights as a parent, what your rights are is to participate equally in the decision-making process. So you can have the school give their recommendations, but you know your child the best, okay, at a home setting where they don't get to see your child. And you can bring up certain situations where you can make recommendations. So there's an equal participation here. Sometimes you'll see that it is a struggle with some school districts that will try to impose. But again, remember that the process is supposed to be equal. You can give or withhold your consent for evaluations that are proposed. So if they're saying we want to do a psychological, we want to do a speech, but we also want to do another test, you have the right to say, yes, I want you to administer that test, or no, I don't want you to do that. Okay. Consent is also part of the process for initial services. So when you first initially get services, your consent is a requirement. It is a requirement for evaluations thereafter. Okay, so they cannot evaluate your child without your consent. Be present at a mutually convenient time for both you and the district. So when you're having an IEP meeting, and let's say, for example, you're working a second shift, but you need to attend the meeting early in the morning, that's something that you can say, listen, I want to be able to participate, but it has to be at a time that's also convenient for me and my work schedule. That may be having to also make special arrangements, right? The school district will tell you, well, the union can only do it because the teachers are in a union, they can only do it between this time and this time. It has to be mutually convenient. What I like about it too is that the law for parents has expanded to be able to give you sick days or PTO days where you can use those days also to attend school meetings. So that's also a huge help where parents before didn't have a lot of that flexibility. You can also express your concerns for the education of your child. That is your right to be heard at these meetings and for your input to be considered. Here, the cycle of special education. So the law says that under Child Find, each district has an obligation to locate, identify, and evaluate children that may be suspected of having a disability. So 3 things: locate, identify, and evaluate. Okay, so step 1, identification. That can be you. That can be you writing a letter saying, hey, I suspect that my child has a disability, right? Or it can be a teacher that would do it. It depends on the district, how flexible or not they are with the teachers who would submit such recommendations. But that is the law. The law says that under Child Find, that is the obligation of the district. Step 2, evaluate. Parental consent is necessary. So if you want to have your child evaluated, you need to say, yes, I give permission for you to evaluate my child. After evaluations are done, it's determination of eligibility. So 60 days from the day that you provide consent, they need to determine whether a child is eligible. Are they going to do evaluations? Are they not going to do evaluations? And does your child qualify? Are they eligible are they eligible for services? Step 4, if they are deemed eligible, 30 days from that determination of eligibility, an IEP or 504 needs to be created. Step 5 is implementation of the IEP. You have 90 days from the day of consent to evaluation to implement. So if you look at the timeline between step 3 and 4, all together, it's 3 months, right? And notice it says days. It doesn't tell you business days, it's days, including weekends. Okay. Step 6, your job as a parent is to monitor the IEP. Why do I say that? Because there have been instances where you think that people are following the IEP and they're not. And you're going to know because your child is going to let you know. There have been situations where my own children's IEP have not been followed, and I've caught it. Not everybody does the parts that you think that they're doing. And it's our jobs to make sure that in order for our children to be successful, that we are on top of whether this IEP plan is being followed or not. And step 7, you have a choice of whether you want annual reviews, which you should have. You should have annual IEP meetings and 3-year reevaluations. You have a choice on that part, on the reevaluation, as to whether you want to reevaluate your child sooner. You do not need to wait for 3 years to pass. You can actually say, hey, I suspect something else is going on. I want you to evaluate my child sooner than the 3 years. Okay. At your request, they have to respond. Okay. Annual reviews are a must because we have with child's growing, going from grade to grade, but the reevaluation period is not every 3 years fixed. You can choose to ask for an evaluation earlier. So going through back step 1 and walking you through it, that's called a referral. As I said, child finds is the obligation of finding children that potentially could be eligible. It is the only obligation of the schools in this step. Parents that have a concern or may suspect that their child may have a disability have to do it in writing. If you told the school district, hey, I want you to evaluate my child, great. You didn't write it down, so the timeline goes out the window. Nobody knows when you had this verbal conversation. That's why I said, please do not do this verbally. Put it in writing, hand deliver it with a receipt of signature, or you can also send it certified mail. Okay. I don't like to ever discuss anything verbally. And if I do discuss anything verbally, I follow it up with an email or something in writing. Okay. Because if it's not written, it's like it never happened. That is my motto.
Maria, quick question, comment. You can also do that via email, no? If you write it out and then attach it to an email.
You can write it out and attach it to an email. The problem with emails is they go into junk folders or spam folders, which is why I say you want to use at least 2 sources of making sure that your information got through. Either you're asking for an acknowledgement of receipt in an email back, or you're going to, like I said, send it certified mail and get that receipt back that somebody signed for it, because that is your proof. If people go outside of that bounds.
Got it.
Yeah. And sometimes emails get testy because if you ever end up in a due process proceeding, they will try to argue that email really wasn't an official form of communication of the district. So you want to make sure that you're using 2 avenues to cover yourself. Okay. Once the referral has been made, a meeting should be taking place within 20 days to determine whether an evaluation is necessary. If the district chooses to evaluate, discuss what types of evaluations and what these evaluations will measure. What are they for? If the district chooses not to evaluate, discuss what other services or interventions are available for your child. If they choose not to evaluate, I would say you want to request that the district put in writing why they felt that this wasn't an issue for an evaluation. Make sure that they don't give you something in vague, but that they give you very specific and distinct cogent response, I like to say. If once you have provided consent to the initial eval, all future evaluations that the district may want to conduct on their own or by your request, right? So you have to provide consent. And if you choose not to give consent, an evaluation cannot be made unless the district decides to go before a judge and go to due process. And then they can force you. So I've seen where parents say, nope, there's nothing wrong with my child. and the district says, yes, there is, and we would like to evaluate, but if the parent is not consenting to the evaluation, they have to go before a judge and prove why they need to force the hand into an evaluation. So the district has done that. So it's rare, but they have done it. The evaluation process, you want to have at least 2 evaluations, possibly more, should be conducted so that you have a thorough picture. The evaluations cannot discriminate against your child based on race, ethnicity, or language. So if the child speaks Spanish at home, and that's the language that the child feels most comfortable speaking, then they need to do the evaluation in Spanish. Okay. The evaluations must be conducted in your child's native language, as I said. Evaluations should be conducted in all areas of suspected disability. Okay. A report summarizing the findings of the evaluation should be provided to you at least 10 days before the eligibility meeting to give you sufficient time to review what's being said in the evals. And if you have any questions, that you can come to the table and discuss those questions. If you don't agree with the district's evaluation, you have the right to request an independent evaluation at the expense of the district, meaning you're not paying for it. They have to use district funds to do this evaluation. You do not have to explain why you do not agree. It would be a good idea to tell them why you don't agree. I try to be, I try to say I don't agree for multiple reasons. I can probably list 1 or 2 in a sentence. I've seen evaluations where, for example, I would come to the table and say, I don't agree with this evaluation. Well, Ms. Lawrence, why don't you agree with the eval? Well, because there's another kid's name in the eval. See, you did a copy paste. So I don't think that that is my child that you evaluated. That happens more times than you can count. These case managers are overwhelmed. They will copy paste an eval in a minute. The next thing you know, they're saying that your child can read on a college level, and that is not true, because you know that that's not true. So at this point, that would be a reason why I would say, no, I don't agree with this eval. Or I don't agree with this eval because I don't think that you dug deep enough to find what the root issues are based on what I said. There's a few books and recommendations that I can give you regarding evaluations that I've used in the past, because I like to look at what the school district is trying to get to, and some of these evals have different subtests that you think that that you would think that the district did them, but they didn't. They just cherry picked what parts of the subtest they wanted to do. Okay. You will have to request for an independent evaluation in writing or a certified letter. If you're handing the letter in person, don't forget to get the signature, a printed name and the date, and the time of who signed this. The district cannot outright deny your request for an independent evaluation. They either have to accept what you've stated, or they're going to have to go to court and put you through a proceeding of due process. This is where you go before a judge and you have to explain to the judge your position and why. Okay. And the district's point here is to prove that their evaluations were sufficient. Examples of different types of evaluations. If your child is exhibiting behavioral difficulties, experiencing distractions, inability to focus, you can request for a functional behavior assessment. This is one of my best assessments to go to. Why? Because there is an observation that happens in the classroom from a behavioral perspective. They have to do it across different settings. So it's not just in your child's favorite activity. You got to do it when it's a favorite activity and a non-favorite activity. Okay. And it gives a good roundabout picture of transitions with a child and behaviors. So if your child is a behavioral child, like mine was, and he's shutting down and he puts his head on the table and he hides under the desk, how do we coax him to come out and participate and do the things that he needs to do with the rest of the class? It could be a reward. It could be giving him something. It could be many things that we use to try to incentivize the child to come to the table and do that work. So an FBA is a really, really good assessment when done appropriately, preferably with a certified BCBA. That would be the best. Psychological evaluation measures the IQ and intelligence, and examples of some of the tests are the Wechsler, the Stanford Binet, or the DAS. These are tests that measure IQs and aptitude. If you suspect that your child may have a difficulty or delays with speech, one of my favorite tests would be the SELF, the Peabody, or the TOLD. Okay, these can be administered and they each target areas of speech. If your child's experiencing hardship in navigating their environment, they constantly trip or they fall or they're clumsy, perhaps a physical evaluation would be best, just to see how gait is and how they're able to, why this is happening. If your child is having difficulties or challenges in writing or cutting alongside a dotted line, self-regulating emotions, you may want to ask for an occupational therapy evaluation to assist. Step 3, once your child has been identified with a disability in accordance with the law, this disability should affect the ability of your child's learning. That's how the district is going to determine that. What is the academic impact? If we do nothing, what happens to this child, right? Your child requires a special education or related service to be able to benefit from an appropriate education. That's usually the outcome, right? Does your child need to have things, instead of giving to him in one shot, chunked out and parsed out in pieces so that they're not overwhelmed? Do they need modifications to their homework? Those are the things that require special education. Does a resource teacher come in and push in, or do they pull them out of the classroom, right? These are things that need to be discussed. The federal government states that categories of eligibility are the ones that I've displayed here: auditory impairment, autism, cognitive impairment, a speech impairment, emotionally disturbed, multiple disabilities, deaf or blind, orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, social inadaptability, specific disability, and we'll get to this because the code talks about specific disability and what are the requirements to be categorized under there. Traumatic brain injury, visual impairment, preschool impairment, because New Jersey does not give diagnosis to children under the age of 5. So between that age of 3 and 4, your child is going to be classified as a preschooler with a disability until the turning 5 meeting, when they have to do a full range of evals. And during those full range of evals, your child will fall into one of these categories. And then speech only or occupational only if you have a 504, okay? Who can attend an IEP meeting? The child study team consists of the followings. Nothing happens without you at the table. So you're number 1, okay? Number 2, the general education teacher. There should be a gen ed teacher there that is there to listen and give suggestions as to, what the general education curriculum is. An individual that's qualified to provide or supervise special education, such as a case manager. Sometimes your case manager is also your psychologist. They're wearing dual hats. And a special education teacher is very important, because that's the teacher that's going to be teaching your child. Someone that can interpret the results of the evaluations. So a translator, if you do not speak English, or a therapist that administered the evaluation. So you want to make sure that someone that can interpret the results from a language perspective, and somebody that can break it down into layman's terms, because there is a lot of jargon in some of these evaluations. Individual that is authorized to make a decision on behalf of the district. That has to be a supervisor or someone from special education that has the authority to say yes or no. If you do not have somebody in your meeting that has authority to make a decision, you did not have an IEP meeting. Okay? And the student, when appropriate, should attend the IEP meeting. Anyone outside of the 6 people that I listed will have to obtain your consent to attend prior to the meeting. Okay, I often find, and Christina and I and many of us can attest that when one of us goes to a meeting to assist and aid a parent, the first thing they will do is that they will put a lawyer in the meeting, and the lawyer is there to be a roadblock. I don't think many times, at least in Elizabeth, that the lawyer is a roadblock. But in other districts, I've attended with other parents, and it's been a very collaborative process where we're talking things out. And I tell people I'm a friend, right? Because the minute you say advocate, it comes across as a little adversarial. People get put on notice. They're afraid to say anything because they might make a mistake. Okay. So these are the people that can attend an IEP meeting.
Maria,
Mhm.
at this point, did you want to mention about recording the meeting?
Yes, I was going to get to that later, but
Oh, okay.
I can hit it on the nail right now. So
Okay.
you do have the right to record your IEP meeting. Now, I am going to preface that by saying that the state of New Jersey is a one-party consent state. That means that I can record you without you knowing, because only one of us needs to know that one of us is being recorded, and that could be me, right? Or the person doing the recording. In an IEP meeting, you want to let them know in advance. Why do you want to do that? Because if you ever end up in court and you have a recording where you didn't tell them you were being recorded, the district did not have the equal opportunity to record. Your recording may be inadmissible. And you don't want that. Even though, because you did not give them the opportunity when they asked you and you weren't truthful about it. I do not recommend at any stage of anything that you do not record. I'm going to be very honest, because sometimes people are very nonchalant and would say things that they otherwise would not say if they were being recorded. So I would be very, very cautious about that. I have apps that I can share with you that I've used for recordings that not just record, but also transcribe the conversation that is going on in the room. It shows as a recording and a transcription so that you can always go back and refer to it. So I do like to record every single IEP meeting. I do not cut a break at all for recording, because that is my proof. I can also go back home. I can listen to what was said. I may have missed something, and I can go back and replay it and then take more notes as to what I wanted to ask or any follow-up questions I had. Okay. Components of an IEP, you have the present level of academic or functional performance, also known as the PLAF. Set realistic goals in accordance with the curriculum. That's where you set goals for your child. I will say that I've seen some IEPs with goals of 60%. I think that is atrocious. If you're setting up a plan and we're saying that we expect a child to read 60% of the time, that is a disservice to the child, because you're not helping that child. I don't expect my child to read 60 or 50% of the time. I expect him to read on point. Above 90%, he needs to be able to read and understand what he's reading. You have to decide if related services are needed, such as speech, OT, one-to-one assistant, an electronic assistive device. Decision if the child can be educated in general ed or a different type of setting. Expression of parental concerns. Super, super, super important. Every IEP has a section that says parental concerns. Do not ever leave that section empty. The school district, based on the meeting, how good or how bad it was, will paraphrase in their own words what they want to put in that section. Do not give them the power, because this is the only section in your IEP where you can write what your concerns are. And if you disagree with anything, this is the only spot in the entire 15, 18, 21 page document that you have to document your concerns, whether you agree, don't agree with anything that has been said or is being done. Okay? Don't ever leave that section empty. You are entitled to write out your own parental concerns, submit them to the district, and ask them to add it to the IEP verbatim. They are not to switch, alter, change, or paraphrase anything that you wrote. I learned this lesson the hard way. So I've actually done that myself. I encourage every parent to do the same. A transition plan, if a child is turning 14 years and older, there is a section in the IEP for transition. The evaluations that are being conducted, there will usually be a summary of it, and the needs of the student. Behavior, language, do they have any needs in those areas? Maybe your child needs an FM system, and that would be noted. Does the child qualify for extended school year? IEP meetings tend to run long. And because such, some districts would skip the ESY talk or just talk about it very briefly. ESY is a very important component of special education. This is where the child gets continuity throughout the summer to continue to carry those skills over. It is a very important section. If you don't touch on it at the beginning of your IEP, if it falls anywhere between September to March, I definitely encourage you to set up a follow-up IEP and be able to address ESY and as the date gets closer to have that discussion. And any extracurricular activities such as the sports or an art. Type of classrooms that are in the district. You have a gen ed classroom, a general education classroom with resource. That means either a teacher that pushes into your setting or pulls your child out of a particular setting, takes them to a quieter place to be able to work with a group of children. A self-contained special education classroom, which can be an autism classroom or mild, moderate disabled, or LLD severe, learning language disabled severe class. Or an out of district, whether it is in a public school or whether it's in a private school. Okay, hospital or home instruction or residential. Numbers 5 and 6 are limited to very specific circumstances and or situations. If you have home instruction, you don't want to keep your child on that for too long. You want to be able to find placement for your child as quickly as possible. And if you believe that the district is not providing you with the related services necessary, you will have to initiate a mediation process to establish your position. Please come prepared with documentation to these types of proceedings, okay? Implementation of the IEP. You will have to provide your consent to the initial IEP before it can be implemented. Now, this is the only IEP I will ever sign in the lifetime of my children. Beyond the initial IEP, there's no need for me to sign an IEP. After that, because the IEP goes into effect 15 days from that meeting. So if I do nothing, if I take no action, I have no disagreement, the IEP goes into effect no matter what, 15 days afterward. If you do not consent, the district is under no obligation to provide those services to you. This is during your initial consent, okay? You can rescind your consent at any time. Parents are encouraged, again, as I said, to monitor the implementation of the IEP and adjustment of the goals for the child year to year. Annual review and reevaluation. Every year, a child study team is going to set up a meeting to go over your progress and make any changes to the goals or make any changes to the program, potentially, depending on what they see. Every 3 years, you have a reevaluation of your child. It will be conducted to see if your child continues to remain eligible for special education services. It is your obligation I would say, to be vigilant and be on top of things. It is also necessary for you to observe and track whether your child is making progress and state your concerns as well as voice the goals for your child. If you feel that there needs to be another goal that addresses another issue, then you can ask the IEP team to create a goal, or you can actually potentially create that goal and ask that it be put into the IEP. Okay. In addition to the reevaluation, like I said, that happens every 3 years. But if you feel that you see something and you want to bump up that timeline, you want another evaluation, you can do that as well. Okay. Yeah. Your child, these are your rights. Your child has the right to the same program offered to typical children. Just if your child is on the spectrum, if your child has challenges, they have the same right as any other kid. They cannot discriminate against your child. Your child can participate in music, in art, in honor programs and programs for gifted and talented children. You have the right to a qualified teacher in accordance with No Child Left Behind. You can actually Oprah request the credentials of teachers to understand what their qualifications are and to show that they are highly qualified to provide instruction to your child. The right to staff members that are properly equipped and that they're trained. Access to copy of your child's education records, including evaluations before any meeting. You have the right to have your child's information and privacy protected. To request information that's not correct to be removed from your child's record, and to include your disagreement in writing into your child's record. You also have the right to request an IEP and a child study team meeting at any time. Okay, it doesn't happen once a year. You can call a child study team meeting. You can call an IEP several times throughout the year, as often as you deem it necessary to come to the table and meet. The meeting an interpreter or someone who is an interpreter that understands special education terms in order for you to be able to equally participate. Access to the information that you need in order to make an informed decision on your child. The right to bring anyone you wish to the meeting, along with tape recording the meetings. The right to be provided with information concerning what your rights are in your native language. So every time you go to an IEP meeting, you should be receiving a prize, the Parental Rights in Special Education booklet, PRISE. You have to receive that in the language, the native language that you speak. So if you speak Spanish, but you know a little bit of English and you told them your preference is Spanish, they should be giving you this in Spanish. The right to have your concerns which you submit in writing to be addressed in writing, and the right to have any proposed action in writing. If the district says, no, we're not going to give you this, please provide me with prior written notice. That is the notice requirement under federal law that states why I am asking for X and you're telling me no. Why? Explain. And it has to be a cogent explanation. If you do not agree, what do? You have rights, you have safeguards. If you don't agree with the district, there are procedural safeguards. You can request a mediation. Okay, the state will provide a mediator to come in and listen to both sides. The mediator is not there to decide the case. The mediator is just there to assist you and help you get to a place of agreement if you can reach that. Sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. If mediation does not work out for you, they will ask you at the meeting, do you want to convert this into a due process? That is your choice if you wish to go to a due process hearing. A very good and fair understanding of the New Jersey Administrative Code is imperative for every parent to understand and read and dissect before you go to one of these due process meetings. You can also initiate a complaint investigation. So if it's an issue where somebody was not following your child's IEP, in my example, personally, an FM system was not provided to one of my children for more than 4 months. I found out that's because I was monitoring my IEP. I was having conversations with my child about what he was getting and not getting. And I initiated a complaint investigation. The complaint found that indeed my child was not being given an FM system, right? The state has limited recourse, because they'll say, please go back and have an IEP meeting and talk about how you can remedy this. And the school district pretty much was like, well, yeah, he didn't have an FM system. Sorry. And I have requested for compensatory education, but being as my district is extremely contentious and combative, they chose not to give my child anything, right? So sometimes you get a win and sometimes you don't. I also initiated a state complaint because nobody read my child's IEP. There were teachers that did, there were teachers that didn't. And when the school was asked to prove who read the IEP, well, guess what? Casper the Ghost was also included. There was a procedure put in place. The district did not read his IEP 3 different years. 3 different years they got CAPAs. So that just shows consistent gross negligence on my district's part to not be able to do what they should have been doing and following the rule of the law. So this is why it's important to monitor your child's IEP. In this case, nobody read the IEP. And I had a feeling of that. You just know. Investigations and complaints must be completed within a 60-day time period. You cannot do a complaint and do due process at the same time. What they're going to do is they're going to hold your complaint until the due process resolves, and then they will pick back up the complaint on the back end. So it will go into a waiting period for the complaint if you decided to move into due process, okay? All right. Another important thing, as I see, I have a footnote on this slide, is that if you go into mediation that doesn't pan out and you convert it to a due process, well, guess what? There's also mediation again, a due process before the administrative law judge, before it gets assigned to another judge who will then hear your complaint. So there's almost 2 chances at mediation before you get into a due process complaint. Now, preferably, you want to do mediation because you want to show that you are the party that is interested in resolving this, but it is your choice. You're not forced to. Mediation is a process where you enter into willingly. The district also has to agree to enter into mediation. I've had situations where the district would say, no, we don't feel mediation will be very helpful. Let's just go straight to due process. I've also done the same against my district. Okay, so it's very important to know that you have options. You're not forced into this. Some tips to help you. I recommend keeping a communication book for each therapist. If you have a related service provider, keeping a communication book. The communication book serves in 2 ways, right? A, your child is being serviced. You have a record of it. B, you are looking and reading at what that therapist is writing down in that communication book. And it's your opportunity to get information and collaborate with your therapist in school to coordinate with a therapist you may have outside of school. It also helps you because it tells you how your child is doing and what they're working with, so that you can also carry that on into your own home and try to bring it across not just school but also the home setting. You can request for a communication book to be included in your IEP, because remember, if it's not written into that IEP, it doesn't happen. Communicate regularly with your teacher and therapist about progress that's been made, things that are being worked on, and what you can continue to reinforce. If you are told or promised anything with respect to your child, tell them to put it in the IEP or put it in writing. It is always a good idea to record what's being said, as we talked about in the meetings, so that there's no misunderstandings. And no need to be afraid. Speak up in your child's defense. You are their strongest advocate in their voice. Maintain the lines of communication open. Make sure that you're keeping track of their grades on PowerSchool. If your child got a 40, but they modified the grade and made it a 60, you want to understand, well, my child failed this test, so why did he get a 60, right? And sometimes you'll find that teachers put comments in PowerSchool. Keep in mind that you have the right to opt out of testing, NJSLA and benchmarks that are given 3 times a year. So you want to make sure you're not over testing your child, you're not overwhelming your child, but you want to kind of benchmark and see where they stand. Sometimes you may allow for a test or two to be administered. That's your choice. I'll leave it open to some Q&As, but first I wanted to share with you guys the administrative code. But if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take those as well.